Hi there, I'm Dr. Kristie Overstreet, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the different stages of grief. Let's start out with talking about what grief actually is. We're going to cover the 5 stages of grief, the 4 stages of mourning, and then when grief turns into depression, and then tips to help you navigate the whole process. So let's start out with grief. As you're thinking about grief, I know it's easy to think about it as loss, but grief is really a normal, healthy response to loss, and it kind of describes those feelings when we lose someone or something that's really important to us. And we all grieve for different reasons. It could be the death of a loved one, and this includes our pets and our fur babies. It could be a divorce or change in the relationships, including friendships. It could be changes to your health or the health of a loved one. It could be a job loss or a change in financial security. Changes in the way you live your life, such as during retirement or moving to a new place or a new transition in the family. These things can definitely trigger grief. And we have to remember that grief isn't always physical. You can experience grief if you or loved one is diagnosed with a major disease or face a serious illness. You grieve the future and the way you thought things would be, and those changes definitely trigger that grief. It's good to remember that grief looks different for everyone, and it can include emotional and physical symptoms, such as some common physical, emotional ones are anger, anxiety, blame, confusion, denial, depression, fear, guilt. Guilt's definitely a big one. Irritability, loneliness, numbness, relief, sadness, shock, and yearning. A couple of thought symptoms that might happen is confusion. You may find it difficult to concentrate. You might be in disbelief that you can't believe this is happening. You can even experience hallucinations or preoccupation with what was lost. A few physical symptoms you might experience are dizziness, rapid heartbeat, fatigue, headaches, hyperventilating, nausea or upset stomach, shortness of breath, tightness or heaviness in your throat or chest, weight loss, or even weight gain. Behavior symptoms might look like crying spells, and this can come with floods or waves of emotion at any time. Excessive activity, irritability, or aggression could be a loss of energy, a loss of interest in the things you used to enjoy doing. You can feel restless and have trouble sleeping. These are just a couple of the different symptoms that you experience with the grief and loss. Now, let's talk a little bit about the 5 stages of grief, and you may be already familiar with them, but let's go ahead and walk through them. A Swiss psychiatrist, Kubler-Ross, first introduced her 5 stages of grief in her book on death and dying. And this model was based on her work with terminally ill patients and has received some criticism in the years since because there's different models that express the grieving process. But people mainly studied her model thinking that there was a specific order in which people grieve and they have to go through all the stages. But Kubler-Ross now notes that this isn't linear. Some people might not experience every single stage, and they definitely don't go through it in a straight line. Yet still, some may only undergo 1 stage, 2 stage, or all 5 stages. It's more readily known that these 5 stages of grief are what's most commonly observed in the grieving population. So let's walk through them. And again, as we go through this, it's really important that you remember that this isn't a linear process. The first step is denial, and this was a big one. This stage is what you initially feel when you think about surviving the loss. You might think that life doesn't make sense at all. It has no meaning. It's just too overwhelming. You can start to deny the news and, in fact, even feel and go numb. It's common in this stage to wonder how life is going to go on in any different state. It's the state of shock because the life you once knew has changed in an instant. If you were diagnosed with a deadly disease, you might believe the news is incorrect. There's a mistake. This could not have occurred the way it is. They must have mixed up your results with someone else. If you receive news of the loved one has passed away, perhaps you cling to this false hope that they identified the wrong person, that this isn't correct. In this denial stage, you're not living in actual reality, rather you're living in a preferable reality. Interestingly enough, it's denial and shock that help you cope and survive the grief event. This denial aids in pacing your feelings of grief instead of being completely overwhelmed, breaking down with grief, denying and accepting and staggering into the next stages. I want you to think of it as your body's natural defense mechanism saying, hey, there's only so much I can handle at once. It's this feeling that this can't be happening. This is not true. This isn't really happening in reality. What happens is once this denial and this shock starts to fade, the start of the healing process begins. At this point, those feelings that you were once suppressing start coming to the surface. The next stage that you may enter is anger. And this is a really common one that we experience because once we start living in this actual reality again, anger sets in. It's a common thing to think, why me? And life's not fair. And why did this happen to them? You might look to blame others for the cause of your grief and also may redirect your anger to close friends and family, regardless of how much you love them. You find it incomprehensible of how something like this could happen to you. If you're strong in your faith, you might start to question your belief in God. Like, where's God? Why didn't he protect me? Why did he let this happen to my family member or my loved one? Researchers and mental health professionals agree that this anger is a necessary stage of grief and encourage the anger. It's important to truly feel the anger. It's thought that even though it might seem like you have an endless cycle of anger, it will dissipate. The more you truly feel the anger, the more quickly it will dissipate. Then you can start healing. It's not healthy to suppress these feelings of anger. It's a natural process. It's what's supposed to happen, and it's a necessary one. So if you're experiencing that, don't deny it. Don't try to hide it. If you're helping and supporting a loved one who's grieving, don't try to talk them down from their anger or tell them they have no right to be angry. Let them go through their process. If you think about it, in our everyday life, we're told to control the anger towards situations and towards others. But when you experience a grief event, you might feel disconnected from reality, that you have no grounding anymore. Your life's been shattered and there's nothing solid to hold on to it. So think of your anger as a way to hold you on to reality. You might feel deserted or abandoned, that no one's there, that you're alone in the world. The direction of anger towards someone or something can help bring you back to the reality. It's this thing that gives you something to grasp onto to help you move through this natural state of healing. So don't block it, don't suppress it, don't avoid it, and don't tell someone grieving that they shouldn't feel anger, that they can't feel this, because that's not helping. Feel what you need to feel. The third stage that we're going to talk about is bargaining. When something bad happens, have you ever caught yourself making a deal with God, such as, please God, if you heal my husband, I'll strive to be the best wife I ever can be and never complain again. Or if you save my child, I'll be the best parent in the world. This is bargaining. And in a way, this stage is false hope. You might falsely make yourself believe that you can avoid the grief through a type of negotiation. If you change this, I'll change that. You're so desperate to get your life back, will do anything. And guilt is a common wingman of bargaining. This is when you endure the endless what ifs. What if I'd left the house 5 minutes sooner, or maybe the accident wouldn't have happened, or what if I had spent more time with them, or what if I'd made this decision versus that one? What if I'd encouraged them to go get help sooner? This bargaining is the way that we process this stage. The fourth stage is depression. This is a commonly accepted form of grief, meaning we don't shy away from depression. We think, well, of course you feel depressed. You've just lost someone or something you love very much, or you've had this big change in your life. In fact, most people associate depression immediately with grief as if it's a present emotion. It represents the emptiness we feel when we're living in reality and realize a person or situation is gone or over. In this stage, you might feel withdrawn from life. You might feel numb, live in a fog, and not want to get out of bed. The world might seem like it's too much and too overwhelming to face, and you don't want to be around others. You don't feel like talking. You might even experience these feelings of hopelessness and even have suicidal thoughts, thinking, what's the point of going on? And I can't do this without them or without this thing that's happened. The fifth stage is acceptance. This isn't the sense of it's okay that my wife died, or it's okay that I lost my mom, or it's all right that this circumstance happened in my life to cause this grief. Think of it rather that my wife died, but I'm going to be okay, or I went through this big change in life, but it's going to be okay. This is the stage your emotions begin to stabilize. You start re-entering reality. You come to terms with the fact that the new reality is that your partner's never coming back, or that you're going to succumb to your illness and die soon, or that the situation that's affected you is going to get better, and you're okay with it. It's not that it's a good thing, but it's something you can live with. It's definitely a time of adjustment, readjustment, and readjustment some more. There's going to be good days and good days again and bad days again. In this stage, it doesn't mean you'll never have another bad day. It just means that you're not uncontrollably sad, tearful, and in this space of grief at all times. You start lifting out of this fog you've been feeling. You start engaging with friends again, and you might even make new relationships over time. You understand that these loved ones and situations can never be replaced, but you move, you grow, and you continue to evolve into this new reality that you didn't ask for, but you're at a place of accepting that it's happening. Now, let's talk about the 4 stages of mourning. And these stages take a more fluid and flexible approach to the grief process. This was first developed back in the 80s by J. William Warden, and it offers an alternative to these earlier stages and phases of grief. So you can think of it as another way to approach grief. We look at it in 4 tasks. The first task is to accept the reality of the lost, that it's happening, that they're gone, that you've had this situation happen in your life. Task 2 is to process the pain of the loss. You've now accepted it. Now it's time to deal with the pain. And task 3 is to adjust to the world without the deceased. Now you're adjusting, living your daily life, and the changes that happened since the person passed away. Task 4 is to find a way to remember the deceased while embarking on the rest of one's journey through life. These 4 tasks are an alternative model, so they're meant to be fluid and not linear. There's not a fixed progression that you have to finish one to move to the next. They're fluid and they're flexible. And that's the thing about grief in general. As you go through the different stages, you can be completely okay and have this huge wave of emotion that washes over you and that causes you this distress. It's okay to let these waves happen. Don't try to run from them. Let them wash over you. Have the emotion that you need to feel and experience at the time. It will get better and it will lessen over time. But sometimes it can feel worse. And this is when grief can turn into depression. Sure, it's normal to feel sad after a loss. These feelings associated with grief should be temporary, but sometimes these feelings last longer, or you may have trouble dealing with these emotions you're experiencing. When this happens, grief can turn into depression. See, the symptoms of grief and depression are pretty similar, but signs that this could be turning into depression looks like this. Maybe you don't start to feel any better even as time passes. You have ongoing difficulty with eating or sleeping. Your feelings begin to disrupt your daily life after time has passed. You rely on drugs or alcohol to cope and deal. And you start to think about hurting yourself or others. It's really important if this is happening that you reach out for help and support. So let's talk about some tips on how you can continue to move and grow and navigate through this journey. Number 1, know that these processes look different for everybody. And to know that at one moment you could be in the anger stage and you could get closer to the acceptance stage and think, I'm there, I'm accepting this happening, and then go all the way back to denial, which is, I can't believe this is happening. Knowing that these stages are not linear and straightforward, they go back into depending on where you're at and how you're feeling. You got to do number 2, which is give yourself permission to grieve. Don't jump right back into things. I know you want to stay busy and take care of yourself, but make sure when those waves of emotion come over you, that you give yourself space and a place to be able to go through them. Let friends and family support you. They're going to be around you. Let them support, take care, and help you. But also don't be afraid to tell them, I need some space. Because when we go through losses, we get really succumbed by people, phone calls, texts, people stopping by the house, people trying to feed you, people trying to take care of you. Let them, but also speak up when you need some time alone. Number 4, express your feelings, don't avoid them. If you stuff and stack them, it's only going to get worse. Number 5, get support online or in person, whether it's an online support group, whether it's a Facebook group, whether it's a space in your community. Let someone help, therapist, coach, pastor, whoever you trust and want to get some support from. Don't deny this from yourself. And one of my favorites is number 6, try journaling or writing. You can write to your loved one, write them a letter, tell them everything you want them to know, everything you want to say to them. It's very therapeutic to get this out and to help you process this. Your grieving process from denial to acceptance is yours and no one else's. And you're not going to do it wrong. You got to go through it as you need to. Don't compare yourselves to others. And so many people will give you their advice on what you need to do. I want you to trust your gut. Do what you need to do and take the journey on at your pace, nobody else's. I appreciate you letting me walk through this part of your journey through grief and loss. You can do this. Hang in there and get the support you deserve.